Hello and welcome to episode 255 of the Crate and Crowbar. It's the something of September 2018. My name is Chris. The 19th of September.
So it's Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Oh, let's not.
No.
It's not 2008 anymore.
Gamers!
This isn't the Neopets forums.
Wow, you broke that rule really fast.
I am not interested in adhering to your stipulations. You're not the king of the podcast.
No, I'm not.
This is a collective.
It is. And, but a pirate ship has a captain.
Yeah, but we're not on a pirate ship.
You've just whipped the conceptual rug out from under me again.
You're talking like a pirate. You're not on a boat.
I thought one followed after the other. Apparently not.
But you can do piracy without being on a boat.
Computer game piracy?
Yeah, talking like a pirate. You could just be like, did you download those sweet files? Yeah. Or whatever people
I don't think that's how either kind of pirate talks.
Alan, did you download the files?
They're all called Alan or some shit.
I've got some cannonballs. It's fine.
Thank you for downloading this sweet file into here. And also, sorry.
Please don't pirate the podcast.
It's free.
It's free. Unless you're a Patreon backer, thank you.
Crowdfunding is complicated. That
like
Patreon's
inverse piracy. Paying for a thing you don't have to pay for.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Charity, they call it.
Speak like a reverse pirate and say, rah.
So.
Rar.
I think I've had enough of this. I'm just going to leave.
You were right, John. Do you want to go? I was going to introduce you, but then, yeah. Oh, it's John R, everybody. Hey! Also joining me inevitably is Pip and Tom Francis. You've heard their voices already, and I just don't want to enter the charade of pretending that you didn't know that. My name's Chris Thurston. My microphone's gone all droopy. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Crate and Crowbar. We are recording this right on the eve of EGX. You and I will be there, won't we, Pip?
Yes.
Cool.
As you listen to this, we will be there.
Yeah, or at the very least in Birmingham. Incredible. Is there any news?
By the time you listen to this, the next heat signature update will be in open beta, so you can play that.
Tell us about that, Tom.
No. I can tell you the gist, but I want to announce the features like day by day as we go.
Fine.
Although, if you're playing it, you can like find out organically. But it was a thing that started as like, we should add some extra challenge for the people who are finding it, for like the most committed players who already found all the best shit and want something that's still difficult even in that situation. And then as we made it, I wanted to add every other thing I always wanted to add to Heat Signature during development, including a lot of stuff that's not for high level players and is just for everyone. So it's got 20 features that we've added.
Wow.
And we're going to be announcing those over the next week.
Lovely. Is that through the Heat Signature Twitter account, probably?
Yeah, and also just on like the Steam community page thing. I used to, we do have an official site for Heat Signature, but my hosting provider just goes down anytime it gets any significant traffic spike, so I'm just going to use Steam's community messaging update things for talking about it.
Seems sensible. I won't pressure you into saying anything. Sorry that I mentioned it.
That's right, I brought it up.
We're launching as you listen to this, there's a HackMud update today as well, which is exciting if true, and it is.
HackMud and Heat Signature have very similar birthdays, don't they?
Yeah, it's HackMud's second birthday on Saturday.
Heat Signature's first on Friday.
Huh. That is what happens when games come out in mid to late September.
It's my birthday today.
No, it's not.
Oh. I thought that there was at least a 50% chance in this room of being believed.
If it was just me and John, probably.
I've tried that a lot of times, like on my parents. Like my dad's telling me off, but it's my birthday. And then like he has to actually stop and sort of check in.
Yeah, and actually, if you are listening to this, it'll probably go up Friday morning, I imagine, and you're going to EGX, then there is barely time for you to know that I'm doing a talk about HackMud at 5:30 on Friday, which is today, I think. And if you listen to this after that, it's not time. And if you're around, that's 5:30 on the res session stage about narrative and stuff. And if you're around on Saturday, then I'm doing the Cyberpunk 2020 live PlayStation Access on the PlayStation stage. I just plugged two things completely unforgivably, and everyone was silent throughout. And yeah.
We were respectful.
No, this is good because you talked about it. You mentioned last week that you're going to be there, but you couldn't say what you were going to be doing.
That's true, yeah. Those are the two things. There's something on 5:30 on both Friday and Saturday, which is really convenient if you only like remembering one time and 2 separate days.
People might be interested to know that a game by former or honorary Crate and Crowbar member Graham Smith is going to be shown at EGX.
Dead to us now.
Yeah, what are the former
Rip
crew
Graham.
members?
There's a segment in the sidebar is Dead to us.
Okay. Currently Dead to us member Graham Smith.
Erstwhile.
He's making a procedural detective game. Procedural both in the randomly generated sense and in the it's a TV show kind of thing. Like in the game you are both solving crimes and on a TV show. And that's playable? Yeah, playable at EGX.
Yeah.
Prime Time Detective.
Yes. In the UK Games Fund area, which I can't remember where that is, but.
Yeah, and Alex will be around. He's doing a talk.
I have some friends who have games in the Left Field collection.
Cool.
My friend Gabrielle has a game called Small Talk, which is a really cool, like a surreal, a game where you're at a strange party and you can talk to people and get inside their head in some interesting way. Called Small Talk, if I didn't already say that. And I mentioned before on this podcast, TikTok, A Tale for Two by my friends Mira and Tanya is also in the Left Field collection, and that's a co-op puzzle narrative game where you play it with two people and you're solving puzzles by you both have access to different information, and so you have to talk to kind of figure out the story.
Left Field collection is always really interesting and worth checking out. I think my favourite was from a couple of years ago where you had to push a button really quickly or a knife would chop your finger off.
Yeah, I remember that. That was at Resd, I think.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like it was a knife that swung back and forth and you had a button that you could press that was sort of in the arc of the knife swing. So
In the game?
No, as in
it was a physical knife, wasn't it?
Like setup. So there was a literal knife.
Yeah.
I assume it was a
Swinging in
relatively
an
blunt
arc.
one, right?
Well, I think and I think it wasn't going like fast enough to actually kill you, but I was kind of like
Kill you.
or you know,
It also wasn't poisoned, so that's...
because, you know, if you'd been in a crowd and pushed up against the side, it could have slit you from hither to nither.
Good done.
But, you know, anyway, I think that this is like Escape the Room games where you can't, like, just be in there forever and, you know...
Yeah, they have to let you out.
Deal with it.
That's
They can't stab you forever in this game.
The only way to
know,
win
if
an
you
escape room is not to play, go to sleep.
But if you had, like, a really sharp, like, scalpel blade and it's like there were real stakes...
I'm still not sure why this is a game.
But it's in the manner of, you know, ways that people find to amuse themselves and actually, like, mechanizing it, right?
I guess
like
so.
that thing that people do, you know, where they...
The
you know,
knifey, handy, bishopsy, alien-y thing.
I can see you've played knifey handy before.
yeah, where you stab the gap between your fingers increasingly fast, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But a robot does it for you.
Which, I mean,
Or a game.
It is well, the problem is in Aliens it is a
But,
robot.
I mean, isn't this like
Anyway.
a skill challenge in any sort of game? It's like to do a thing within the allotted time frame.
I just would assume that a
feel
lot of the
good
time,
about it.
the appeal of violent threats in games is they only threaten the character on the screen, not your actual hand.
So it's for
With a
when
knife.
you need bigger thrills and bigger danger.
Yeah, after you've dodged enough knives in a video
You could
game.
use someone else's hand if you wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Play it like as a third person thing where you just hold someone else's hand over the button.
I'm interested in the health and safety regulations at Res because my friend David was promoting a board game based on a book called Machine of Death, and the part of the fiction is that a machine takes a blood sample from you and tells you how you're going to die. And to promote it, he had a kind of mock-up machine where you put your hand in there and it sort of pretends to prick your hand. And what it does is a red pen comes down and dots your hand. And so you have a little red dot. And so it's as if it's blood. But even though it contained no sharp objects, just like the fact that it was claiming to take your blood caused like endless problems with security. He had to go through rounds and rounds of trying to explain to them, no, look, it's just a pen. It doesn't actually stab you.
So I went to a digital art fair up in, this version of it was in Manchester years and years ago. And a really interesting artist called Nellie Ben Haim had her Sawyer's rocket chair there. And that is an armchair that she's rigged up, and it vibrates in just such a way that if you are, I think you're blindfolded rather than seeing anything in like a visor, and you've got like headphones on, and the chair is tilted at an angle. So you hear the noise that you would hear if rockets were actually like taking off and the chair vibrates. And there's a moment sort of just after that experience where you feel genuinely weightless, like it tricks your brain into feeling weightless. So I wonder if they had any red tape around, like, well, technically this is, it's obviously not a rocket. However, have you sort of tricked people into being on a rocket by accident?
Rocket adjacent experience.
This reminds me, this isn't news, but something and you probably can't play it at EGX, but something I played at PAX after many, many years of knowing about it and not getting to play it, was Sound Self, which is a VR experience where it's a sort of meditative thing, and you put on a VR headset, but it also has a microphone, and throughout the whole duration of it, you make noise. You just kind of go, "Mah," or whatever you want to do, really. But it is picking that up and sort of feeding it back to you in a sort of visualizer kind of way. But it's also kind of a scripted thing. There's sort of a kind of journey you go on, and while you're on it, it is modified by what you're doing with your voice, and it's also playing your voice back to you. And that the setup they had for that was one where you lie down, and the seat that you're in, it's almost a bed really. You're hearing these noises, and it also vibrates with the noise as if, and you kind of know that it's headphones and that only you are hearing it, but because the chair is vibrating with the noise, it's not like a sort of like shakes your body in a dramatic way. It's just vibrating as much as it would be if the speakers were fucking enormous and the whole house was like shaking with what was happening. So it's really hard to convince yourself that this is not just like deafening the whole show floor. It's a really amazing effect. And also lying down and looking up, the experience, you are sort of going through, you're going forwards through sort of, very surreal abstract shapes. But it's kind of like going through a tunnel. But when you're lying down, that means you're kind of like lifting up, you're sort of ascending into the sky, basically. And that effect was really interesting. It felt very kind of like, because you're also doing this thing with your voice, and it kind of felt like I was propelling myself with my voice somehow.
Right. Yeah.
Like that was kind of pulling me up into the sky. That was amazing.
I played that a few years ago when it was at Game City. 'Cause it's been a work in progress for a very long time, I think. And sort of as Robin has been, it's Robin Arnott, isn't it?
Yeah.
As he has been sort of like, I guess, meditating on meditation. It's, it's sort of changed and evolved, I think. But at Game City, it was a case of lying or sitting on a beanbag, or sort of, propping yourself up on a beanbag and having it on, I think it was on like a VR headset with like headphones on, and I fell asleep. Genuinely fell asleep. That was, it's such a weird experience to fall asleep on the show floor, literally in full view of everybody.
The contrast at PAX was extreme as well, because it's a massive, busy show and very loud and noisy, and then you strap into this and you're in a total serenity. So I can imagine that.
Yeah.
This is one of the few games though that could tell when you fall asleep, because you stop making the noise. Wake up! It's not time to stop meditating yet. Wake up and calm down.
The ultimate VR horror experience would be that, and you go and you put the headset on the shelf, and it's like, this is going to be an immersive experience of your own voice, and we'll surround you by this sound, and you start experimenting, like, you're doing all the noises and things, and it sounds like it's just everywhere around you, and you take the headset off and it is. It's huge speakers and everyone can hear, and they've just listened to you honk for like 4 minutes.
Just in a totally silent room.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the entire convention is really quiet. That's not sound processing or anything. That's just exactly the sound as it was experienced by everyone.
It's an exam room, and you haven't revised. And
yeah, exactly. And, yes, exactly. That would be good. Do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, there's got to be a genre of prank show that involves, rearranging the world while someone's in VR. So that...
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, there isn't really that feels like, I don't know.
To me, that feels...
I can't really imagine like the VR horror game that's just about being in a really embarrassing situation, but I can sort of.
I feel like rearranging the world while someone's in VR to prank them is quite a kind of mild prank compared to like anything you do to them when they're in VR, I think is just kind of a crime. Like the effect is so extreme and you can have such a bad reaction to that it just should be completely off limits, I think. But waking up and then being like, hang on, what? This whole room is different? That's just a regular prank.
Remember there was that video a while ago of like that VR experience where it was just getting guillotined, the VR game where your head came off and went into a basket.
That was a Ferrovector, I think.
Yeah, this was like Oculus Rift DK1 era. And, but they'd have someone like lean over the back of a chair, like they were climbing into the scaffold and things. And then occasionally someone would just come and like tap the back of their neck with like a butter knife. So like just the coldest touch of completely smooth metal. But people were just like, you can basically, it's like an electric shock to the synapse. It's like the sort of received versus expected kind of stimuli is like just people lose their minds. So yeah, you're right. It should be a crime.
There's a psychological experiment or demonstration similar to that where you, put a piece of cardboard between someone's eyes and have them stare down at their hands. So they can only see one hand at one time. And I can't remember exactly. Oh no, sorry, that's completely wrong. You start like that and then, they replace your left hand with a rubber hand that looks exactly the same. And they run through a variety of like acclimatization stuff. Then they hit the rubber hand with a hammer and almost everyone flinches and cries out in pain. Someone just hit my hand.
We should talk about what we've been playing. John, would you like to tell us about what you've been playing?
I've been playing some of that Frozen Synapse 2.
So have I.
It's the sequel to that simultaneous turn-based game. Is that the right setup?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's like real-time turn-based.
Yeah. 5 seconds of planning, and then you execute and hope everything turns out your way. It's quite similar to the first one, I think. They've done, there's a few interesting new features which, keep the main tactical layer, quite interesting. There's
a knife guy right now.
There's a knife guy.
Because the first one was kind of like, the tactics version of Counter-Strike.
Yeah,
like
I was going to say.
It was just men with assault rifles, basically.
Right, yeah. In this cool kind of holographic style. The first one was very much, kind of stone, paper, scissors, where you had assault rifles and shotguns and rocket launchers and stuff like that. But they've thrown a whole bunch of stuff into the mix. And some things are just better than others now, like pistol guys are just awful. You don't want enough pistol guys, they're just bad. But their knife guys are fun because they move about at least twice as fast than any other unit in the game.
Excellent.
And they're incredibly dumb. So while all of your other units will follow your plan almost exactly, they can adjust their aim slightly to point their gun at someone. Whereas knife guys can't deviate at all from their plan and only and can only take down another unit if they move directly through them.
I said I was going to stab here and I'm going to stab here. I don't care where you are.
So they're really hard to use properly, but very satisfying. I found they're most useful just zigzagging backwards and forwards across a doorway.
I'm going to stab someone if they ever come through.
You learnt that from the Rest game.
Yeah. Wasn't a very early episode of the Crit and Crowbar titled Plausible Deniability Knife Dude? Yes. And this feels like another manifestation of plausible deniability. It's like, I am not a knife murderer. I am going to walk back and I'm going to stab in these places.
My doorway. I'm free to stab it as much as I like, regardless of who comes through.
There's some fun new stuff with area denial, like flamethrowers and miniguns just lock down a huge cone of fire, and are kind of genuinely terrifying if you catch them in the right kind of level layout. And then a really nice little tweak, aside from just general, I think they put quite a lot of work into UI polish because it's a very, very specific game where you have a huge amount of control, like down to like 0.1 seconds. You can be giving these guys orders. And they made a lot of steps in clearing up the UI for that and making it as good as that could possibly be. It's still a lot to deal with if you're really going to micromanage your guys. But I think my favorite thing is previously you could tell your guys to aim in a specific direction. So they swing their cone over to there, so you can kind of strafe around corners more safely than just charging blindly into a room. And now they have a little diamond within that cone of fire. So if you're confident enough that not only you think your enemy is your target's going to be in this direction, if you think he's going to be in this almost exact area, your guys will get a huge boost to their aiming time and probably win that fight.
Yeah, it's very gratifying. It's also like enormously easy to totally overplan and end up like almost the best turns are where you, cause, you know, to clarify, it's not just you plan out your moves. You have full freedom to plan out what you think your opponent's going to do and see exactly kind of mathematically what will resolve if you anticipate it properly. It's not like XCOM. There's no dice roll to like do hit. It's like, it's all completely deterministic, but it's about what the other person does. And you can plan and plan and plan and plan, and then realize that you're playing the same game against, this is one turn. They're playing the game against yourself, and therefore you're playing basically your own expectations and your own ideas against each other. And then you end up with a plan, and then you do it, and then something completely different happens, or your opponent, particularly in multiplayer, your opponent does something that, you know, you both just miss each other. Like, you're kind of like dead-eye shots aiming in completely the wrong direction. Nothing happens. Like,
your opponent does the stupidest thing possible and totally outplays you. Yeah. It happens. But it's those kind of things which, moving over to the single player, I find most infuriating about it. The single player component is, kind of split level overworld of a simulation of this, huge cyber city, with a bunch of factions and stuff inside it, all with their own agents and bases and things. And then, like XCOM, when you have a fight, you, go down to the tactical level. And sometimes I utterly hate it. Like the graph of my enjoyment over time with this game is just huge zigzags up and down constantly. I spent a good couple of hours, or my first couple of hours, were just shouting into a notepad document everything that was frustrating me. And it started about 5 seconds into the intro when their absurd fiction kicks in, and I don't have a clue what's happening. I just checked out immediately after the like shape forms and vat forms. You better get clear what those are immediately. And then the 10 factions in the game, all of whom appear like humans that all dress identically and have cyber names and all want various different things. And all these people are going to be hammering you for attention and asking you to attack the other factions for them. And you don't have a clue what they're asking or what the other faction's done wrong or why you should care. And yeah, I hate that bit particularly. Yeah.
Shape form is a bit of a tautology, isn't it? Doesn't shape mean form?
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, I think it's really like, I thought, Chris Donlan, wrote a nice review of the game for Eurogamer, and something that was sort of implicit in his review, which I sort of, cause I had a very similar experience of initially the campaign, was that like, it's one of those things where it gets better the more you understand about it, which I think is true for us in Synapse generally. And like, that first experience was, and particularly because you start off receiving funding from all of these companies, and each one you piss off, takes money away.
Yeah.
So, and that just happens constantly. Like, it's, you know, it's planned, I think, that you will end up just losing money from companies almost immediately.
Yeah, they flood you with so many mission requests from these guys that, I mean, initially you have one team and very quickly you can have a kind of crappy second team and so on and so on. But there's just so much to do that you have to just ignore these people and see your money, your funds tick down and down and down.
Yeah, it's weird because it doesn't feel like an opportunity cost, although I suspect that's what it actually is in terms of the planned arc of a campaign. But it really does feel like I started with this amount of money and I'm playing a video game, so this is when I go, oh no, I'm losing resources. Like, or I feel like I'm losing resources, but I don't necessarily process what that means in terms of my progress. Yeah, it is a confusing.
Like now, after 5 hours or so with it, I've started to see opportunities within this, and starting to appreciate the simulation in it a little more. Where you can see these faction leaders all have strike teams, much like your own, and they all want to go and fight and capture resources and stuff like that. And if one of these teams you can watch their little unit walk across this city, attack another base, and then you can see what happens afterwards, and you can click on them and see, right, these guys have like 30k in cash and an artifact, and their team status is listed as partial, so they took losses in this mission. So now would be a really good time to intercept their squad or set up a checkpoint later on down the road and ambush them. But then again, it's like, is it worth pissing off this faction? I genuinely have no idea.
I think that was my issue with it, is not knowing. I ended up not worrying about pissing off anybody and just going for the kind of sort of plot critical stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was the angriest, reddest thing I was being told to do at the time, which I think, again, it's been an interesting experience because, like, for me, I find Frozen Synapse, and I found this for the first game, it's so deep as a tactical simulation because it plays you against yourself, which is a great trick. It's like you do play against yourself for a while and try and figure it out. And you let every single turn, that the amount of depth in a single move is almost hard. You have to start making your peace with the fact that you'll never make a perfect decision at the most granular level of Frozen Synapse, which is like one person moving once in one turn. And there are levels of, it's not grid based or anything, like down to the, pixel perfect placement of waypoints, and all of this stuff ultimately matters. So there is some sort of like vast sort of possibility space paralysis simply from that. And so as you expand that out into the simulation, I can see the appeal of that, but for me, multiplayer is more enjoyable because I kind of just want to enjoy those basic mechanics in that.
I think that's absolutely right. Moving those systems over to a long-form single-player campaign, while it works on some level, and I'm still enjoying it, it's kind of flawed by its very nature. There's a lot of combat in it, and often you'll be facing off against more enemy units than your own, and so that's a lot of planning to be doing if you want to invest time in setting up the enemy's predicted actions. And so you kind of stop and just kind of do your best guess at what's going to happen just to get through things quicker, and you're kind of glossing over a huge part of the game at that point.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't help at all that the AI is kind of all over the place. Sometimes it acts totally randomly and is completely impossible to predict on any kind of level. And on the other end, I'm almost certain it cheats. It looks at, because after you've planned your moves, you click on execute, and there's some calculations that happen to resolve exactly how the battle plays out. And I'm almost certain it looks at what you've done and finds the tiny pixel between your intersecting cones of fire and your gas grenades and your explosive RPGs, and puts 5 guys there and shoots everyone immediately. And then the AI then feels guilty about how badly it's trouncing its stupid human opponent, and then just walks a grenadier into his own gas grenade just as like a little token of fuck you as well. Yeah. That's
because in theory, if it's doing, I feel like when you're being asked to plan your turn, you are, in your head, it's like the enemy has already planned their turn. Now you're figuring out what you're going to do. And so if that's the case, then there should be no processing time after you click commit, because it already knows how to simulate everything, right? The time it should take to simulate a plan that you put in is instant. It doesn't have to compile every time you plan something and want to simulate it. So if the enemy already knew what they're going to do, the processing time should be 0 when you commit.
So it's definitely messing with it.
Yeah.
Well, they could, if it's not, the processing time doesn't have to be at the end of the turn, but it still could be. If it was me and they were committing their time, I'd do the processing before the turn so that when you click commit, you get that instant kind of gratification.
Yeah.
If they're cheating, they would have to do it after the turn.
I find it really difficult to kind of get into a stride of the campaign. Like, I almost don't want to pass judgment on it. Like, there are things I like about the atmosphere. I love the music, and that sells me on things like the writing a little more, because it is, I couldn't remember the plot of the first game, so the references to what happened, I just really did go over my head. But the music's incredible and does look kind of, and I wanted to sort of sink into it, but partly I think, the choice paralysis stuff just really, really started to like, it's big town. It's a big town. It's a big town problem. And
you summed that up a little better than my rambling annoyances.
No, not at all. But it's true. But you hit a lot of speed bumps really quickly. The other thing is there's like a little button in the bottom right corner of the screen, bottom left corner of the screen, and it's a little red light. And if you click it onto green, it just starts looking for a multiplayer game for you.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that at any given time you're playing 10 games of multiplayer and you, whenever your opponent posts their turn, you go in and do yours, and there's no need to be playing at the same time as somebody. So you always have all these other games with Horizon Synapse at the go. And this for me is like, it's almost unique to this game. It's like this sort of fractal expansion of this fundamentally like dizzyingly complicated basic unit of complication that is then extrapolated hugely out across this campaign, and then also extrapolated out across the other 10 games you're playing at the same time.
Yeah.
So, which is really gratifying because it feels like there's always an interesting set of strategic decisions to be being made somewhere. But I found it, as I've then played more of it, easier and easier to simply play the part of it that delivers that straight away, which is in the first instance regular multiplayer. And have you played one turn mode yet?
Yes.
I really like.
Great addition.
It's great. It's such a good idea. So one turn mode is basically just, it's distilled all the way back down again. It's like this telescopic expansion of the game right back down to its really basic unit. You just play one turn against another person. And you load onto a map, and you've got a situation, 2 teams, and an objective, which might just be like kills. It might be picking up items, something like that. And you plan out what you think is the perfect turn from your perspective, and you can simulate your opponent's go as much as possible. And then, if no one else has ever played this before, you just post it, and later on you can load up the game and have a look at all the ones you've done. And if there's a little star next to it, it means someone else has posted a go from the other side, and you can see who wins. Or often you'll be loaded into one where someone has left another go. So you just there's no waiting for your opponent to take their turn or anything. You just have a go at it, and winning those feels incredible because you don't have the additional complexity of like, oh, well, I'm doing this turn to set up for next turn. It's just plan one turn, which is Horizon Synapse at its absolute purest.
Yeah. And
I found it really gratifying. Like, I spent agonized over one, and it was the first one I'd ever hit that I hadn't set up, that there wasn't another side for. So I spent ages agonizing over this kind of like perfect run of like a flamethrower guy waits, like if he runs here in flamethrowers, then this guy has to wait for exactly a second, 1.4 seconds, so that he runs around the corner in time to get the package, but after the minimum time for the flamethrowers, etc., all this stuff. And then I got one today, and it's like someone else has played it, and I loaded it up, and I like completely anticipated what they were going to do, and it's like, and then you imagine them doing it and being like, oh,
yeah,
they cheated, obviously.
It reminds me of chess puzzles you used to get in newspapers. It's like, you are in check at this point. You have, how do you get out of this? And much like the AI playing against my turns, this feels like the more fun part of the game, where you have you can simulate a lot more precisely, you can invest that time in, and then you can exploit every, like, 10th of a second to try and get out of this horrible situation.
And I think the reason for that is because you know it's called one turn mode, there's a tension that I think the game sometimes struggles to resolve. The good thing about it is I kind of felt this confidence buying it was that I'm probably not going to play everything. With the first game, I didn't play everything you could do in it, but I'll probably find the thing I enjoy about it and do that. And at the moment, that's not the campaign, it's this stuff, but that could change. But the thing that really, like, kind of gets me about it is that, like, if you were investing that kind of time into every turn of your campaign, you'll be playing that game for 400 years. You know, play it for the rest of your life, or it feels that way, right? Yeah. It's like, you have this sort of, maybe an artificial tension, which is like, how much time do I want to invest in this video game versus what kind of results do I want? Whereas normally, like, in a grand strategy game, you're not asked to make that decision. It's not like if you spend 3 hours on this one battle in Civ, everything will be better for you. You don't really have that. I mean, Total War maybe has some of that, but there's a pretty hard cap on how complicated that can get. Whereas this does feel like if you're the cleverest person alive, you can ace it in a way that I can't fathom, but it requires that investment, and I'm not either of those things.
In its favour, in the single-player game, the mercs that you hire have their name is composed of a kind of random first name and then the gun they're holding. So you can get Daryl minigun.
And I do wonder, like, that just feels like a UI decision. Was it previously like, here's a proper randomly generated name and subtitle of their, you know, maybe like a class name. So it's like Vanguard, and the Vanguard is the shotgun person. It's like, let's just reduce this to like Ian minigun. I think one of mine is called something like Giganto Knife.
Exacto Knife would be a good one.
Yeah. And also you can customize your own faction name and also your proper name in the game. So it does diffuse a lot of my stress that everyone addresses me as Butts. So.
I wanted to play this game, and I wanted to play it on my laptop, which is a fairly decent laptop with like a proper, like NVIDIA, 1050, which sounds like it's the mobile version of the 1080. And it runs at 10 FPS on low. So I just can't.
Yeah, I don't know how intensive it is. In terms of like 3D rendering, it's not doing a huge amount. You can get some quite large scenes and there's a bunch of characters and stuff in there. But the city simulation seems to be quite advanced. There's a bunch of buildings in there. And if you have an encounter in any of them, it zooms in seamlessly and down to the tactical level where you have a unique playing field down there.
It's based on the shape of the building as well.
Which is based on the shape of the building, yeah. It's a pretty cool achievement.
Yeah. And like, yeah, no, I mean, this, it's just so much to it. Like, I feel like I've played maybe 5 or 6 hours of it now, and most of that's been in multiplayer, and I feel like again, as I always feel with Horizon Synapse, I always feel like I'm leaving something on the table. Like, there's some part of this dimension that I'm not cracking because I'm not smart enough. But that's not a terrible problem to have. It's just intimidating.
But then you zigzag your knife guy in front of a door and kill 3 people who just kind of wander through it, and then you can just check out for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
That's good.
Pip.
Hello.
What have you been up to in the world of computer games?
40 hours of Megaquarium since you asked.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No. Yes, that happened. You talked about it a little bit?
No, we actually well, Tom talked about it a little,
I played
but
like half an hour, so
we passed it forward because we knew that this is, I mean, your domain.
I like it. It's really good. I own fish. It is a theme park tycoon kind of game where instead of a theme park, you are running and building up and improving and progressing an aquarium attraction. And so it's things like you assemble tanks and maintain them and feed the fish and purchase more fish and generally build up that side of the experience, but also you research things like coffee stands and t-shirt shelves and things like that so that you can maintain your profits and you have different measures of success and currencies that you're juggling. So there's money, and then there's science points and ecology points, which are both resources that you get from visitors looking at your tanks and the stuff that's inside them. And so you can earn those by making sure that there's the pathing around your aquarium is good so that people see the most that they will see, and also picking what is in a tank as well. And then there is prestige, which is the thing that you use to like rank up and open up more options to research and augment your aquarium further. Any questions?
Yes.
Questions from the floor.
If you just put every tank you had, like, touching each other and adjacent in one long line, and then the other half of them in another long line, and the only way people can walk is one long line between them, are you not optimizing? Isn't that not the perfect aquarium design for maximizing people seeing everything?
Given that is a boring way to play, I haven't done it. It's a very game designer way to play. I mean, obviously there's stuff that happens, well, not obviously, but, so guests get a certain time into the experience or whatever, however it calculates it, and they start to want things like food or drink, or they need the loo, or they want somewhere to sit down. And so you would naturally break that stuff up anyway, but also you can see the percentage of visitors who come to the aquarium who look at a particular tank. And so if it was just one long line that leads away from the door, presumably it would tail off towards the end of that line, because there wouldn't be any point to the visitors getting to the end, and so the stuff at the end wouldn't be generating. Unless
you made the floor like a conveyor belt, so they couldn't get up.
I was thinking,
they're just forced to pass all the tanks.
What if,
and then just a furnace at the end.
What if you equipped every visitor with a golf cart that had a built-in snack tray and a built-in toilet.
I thought you were going to say built-in aquarium.
Yeah.
So what you're thinking of is a camper van.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Fill it with
maybe
fish.
you want to play Fortnite instead.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just thinking, because obviously you can't account for when in their arc through the aquarium someone's going to need a poo. So they have to be able to poo at any point in the journey.
Well, I mean, at that point, why not just give everyone a nappy?
That's a good idea. It's better than my golf. The golf cart idea solves both the mobility and the sitting problem at the same time.
But, I mean, if you're going to do that, just let them watch telly on the loo.
Yeah, I mean,
If we get money out of that, then sure.
I suppose it's not the make everyone happy simulator, is it? It's specifically run an aquarium.
You're running a visitor attraction, and that's not, you wouldn't get many Groupons for that, would you?
I don't know.
Do individual people have like different preferences for what they want to see?
Not that I could tell. I don't think it's that detailed, but you can click on people and find out what their thoughts are. So that's how you can get feedback. They're very basic. It's, that they enjoyed seeing this thing.
Very judgy, Pip.
They were excited about this exhibit, or they're annoyed at the amount of litter on the floor. So you need to sort of have more janitors.
I don't like this conveyor belt, but I'm excited about this furnace coming up.
Exactly. I fucking hate lionfish.
Or, often, so one thing is that you can't just populate the aquarium with, high prestige fish, because the punters will get bored. They'll just sort of say, "Oh, I've seen
This is, if anything,
already.
too prestigious."
I've seen sharks already," and they'll just get a bit eye rolly about it all.
Just need some kelp and a palate cleanser.
They're kicking off about kelp in my
The
aquarium.
sorbet of the aquarium.
No, this is my problem, because I like kelp. And the visitors are like, why is there so much kelp? And I'm not backing down. So I've got to intersperse the kelp with more tanks with other things, because I refuse to get rid of any of the kelp that I've already got. So it's a case of diluting it with other elements.
Are your kelp tanks just kelp?
No, so they're kelp, so the aquariums have the different elements to them. So you've got
Water, fire.
The furnace is the fire aquarium.
Exactly. Conveyor
The
belt.
oven is the fire aquarium, the aquarium of fire. What would be earth? A potato cupboard. There we go.
Yeah.
And what's the other one? Electricity? No, wind. Yes.
Yeah.
That would just be a box, wouldn't it? Brilliant. We've solved
Exactly,
this.
yeah.
Anyway.
What?
So, where was I? What was I talking
The elements of an aquarium.
about? Okay.
Kelp.
So you have what is essentially a glass box filled with water, right? Mm-hmm. But what you also need to do is fish need a particular water quality, and so you have to attach filters, and there are other different types of protein skimming things or UV purification type stuff that will help you with that. And there's also a temperature requirement for the fish. So if they are from cold regions like the Atlantic, pollock, then that will need a chiller attached to the aquarium as well, or to the tank rather. And if they are tropical fish, you'll need to add heaters, and there's different permutations of that kind of thing. And a little while into the game, you can unlock a pump which connects to the aquarium from further away, so you can start hiding all of this ugly maintenance equipment behind a wall so that the visitors don't see it and get annoyed. There's also, once you've put some fish in the tank, there's only a certain amount of space that only a certain amount of fish or size of fish that the tank will support, any given size of tank. And you also need to take into account the fish's preferences. So, for example, some fish shoal, and so they will get really sad and start to languish and die if they do not have multiples of the same kind. Or there are also ones that really hate being with other fish, either in their genus or their specific species. So you have to sort of start layering in all of this give and take, and if this thing is in the same tank as this, it might eat it, or there's stuff that will eat things that are a particular size or below, and so I've got around that by growing some of them in a separate tank and then putting them in and using the original tank for something else, which has been quite interesting, fish reorganization tasks. And each of the fish will have a decor requirement, or habitat rather, I think you'd probably say. So you need to put in plants if they like being around plants, but you might also need to put in rocks or a little cave for them to hide in if they need that, or, they might, they have food requirements as well. So there are things, you need to put food bins nearby so that the staff can come and feed them. So there's all of that side of things. And so some of the reason that there's quite a lot of kelp is that it was an efficient way of upping the plant stat in some of my earlier aquariums. But also as an aesthetic thing, it's the only bit of plant life that you get access to early on that is tall. Right. And so it introduces a bit of visual variety, I thought. And so, when I've got a lot of jellyfish in one of the rounded tanks, which was really cool, it was nice to have a lot of kelp in there with them, because you could actually see it if you looked at the tank in first person view. And so it wasn't just these jellyfish sort of hovering in, quite a blank background. It introduced some of that, which was quite nice.
In first person view, is there a ceiling?
So it's basically...
How is this ambiguous?
I'm trying to remember, because I did look up at one point, and it's...
Players can't look up.
So it's not as if you are in a room, but there is a kind of sky effect. So it's,
wow.
So it's not as if you are in an enclosed space exactly, but it doesn't feel like the ceiling just goes on forever. It does feel like there is some kind of surface above you, but I can't remember.
It's quite abstract, isn't it? Yeah.
Than that.
Is it scenario based? Are you building specific aquariums to meet challenges, or?
There's a campaign, and there's also the sandboxy stuff. The campaign is more about, so the first few levels just really are about teaching you the basics of things, and then later levels you get access to, for example, there's one level where it withholds a lot of the purchasing of fish like you would normally do. And so what you have to do is wait until sellers approach you, and you have to meet particular requirements or have a certain amount of money to actually get the fish that will then up your prestige and start, making I guess an aquarium engine that sustains. So that's been really cool. But there have been a few things where I've just essentially put my foot down about something in a stupid way, and then that has made my life difficult. It's self-imposed challenges as well as the campaign stuff.
Didn't something go quite badly wrong with your first aquarium?
Are you talking about the one where I forgot to hire staff?
Yeah.
So that was not my first aquarium. But I think it's because I had just come to a new campaign level from an aquarium that was really established. And so by the time I left that, I was so used to already having all of these staff that were fulfilling those tasks. It completely slipped my mind that no one would be here in this
right.
one, because I'd been actually demolishing parts of the previous one to shape it better and to make the pathing round it nicer. And so it was that thing of, it didn't feel completely out of the ordinary to go back to basics and to, start from scratch almost in an area. And so I suddenly went, oh, that's why there's 28 autopsy reports.
Wait, of fish or humans?
So it gives you a fish autopsy in your inbox if a fish dies, and that's really useful information.
What kind of budget do they have? A lot of people don't get autopsies.
See, this is the thing. I feel like it's not an autopsy. It is just someone saw what happened, or used,
It's a witness.
He was shot in the head.
exactly, or
cold blood.
used some fairly basic logic. For example, if the fish weren't fed for 8 days and they died of hunger. And if one of them was no longer in the tank and a grouper was looking really pleased with itself, then that fish got eaten. So, yeah.
You have to interview the grouper. Like, where were you in this tank?
Put together a case the DA can make.
Yeah.
That's how we bring him down. Eventually get him on tax evasion.
Yeah.
Kelp evasion.
So that's good.
Good.
Yeah. I know that it's been having a few launch sort of bugs and things, but Tim seems to be working on them at a fair old clip, and I booted it up today and it seemed to be working fine. So, yeah. So that's good. I'm not sure where to take my amazing aquarium at the moment, though. I think I'm still partway through rejigging it to make the behind the scenes maintenance really efficient so that I pack in as many tanks as possible. And I've, in the current thing that I'm playing, I've unlocked a bunch of sharks that it's really cool, but trying to balance them with what they might eat in other tanks is proving
You want to keep those locked if possible, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's proving to be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. So that's my project at the moment.
Does it feel like you'll reach a point with that one where you'll have solved it?
I think that once I have played, I have consciously avoided most of sandbox mode because I don't want to have played with everything unlocked until I actually do it through a progression of a save file, because I think that at that point, once I've seen everything, once I know all of the fish that I could have, then I would find less purpose to tinkering around, or I think I would always play it in unlimited mode so that I could. Yeah, I think it's that kind of thing, but that's specifically a me way of thinking of it. I want to know what fish are left.
Grand. Tom, what have you been up to?
I have a problematic fave, which is a Streets of Rogue, which has been recommended to me many, many times over the years, and it was in early access, so I didn't play it. And then I don't really remember why. I think maybe it was on sale or something, and so I bought it thinking, well, I'm going to play it eventually, so I'll just be in my library. And then I was short of something to play, and I did play it, and everyone was right. It's exactly my kind of thing. It's a top-down roguelike where you're in a sort of like modern day city, but the section of the city you're in will only be like 8 buildings or something, and then there's just an exit, and you just go to the exit once you've finished your missions, and you go on to another section of the city, and it's all randomly generated. But the missions are designed such that it's always just like, kill this person, or get this item from them, or get this item from a safe, or press these 3 switches in this building. And then it's totally open-ended to how you do that. And all the walls are destructible, all the people are killable. You have loads of options, with like bypassing security systems and stuff. And before I get into like what I like about it, I have to mention that, I was really annoyed. It was really soured for me by just one item description, which is, a whistle that makes everyone deaf. And the item description is a joke at the expense of a deaf actor. Right. And it's just really crap. And at the end of it, it says no disrespect. It's like, if at the end of an item description you're writing, you feel like you need to put in brackets no disrespect, what you've written is something that's disrespectful and you shouldn't write it.
Yeah. It's like beginning a sentence with no offense. But.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm not racist, but
yeah,
like that probably is a signifier that you are. I'm hoping it's like, this is optimistic, but it's early access, so maybe he'll patch it out. But mechanically, the game is incredibly my cup of tea. It's, like, the open-endedness is, comes through mostly through, you start as just like a generic character who has no special abilities, and even with that, you can solve any mission. And the kind of, you start with not many items, but you can rummage through like garbage bins and stuff to find it, the usual video game way of acquiring items. And the simplest tactic for like, you need to get to a safe, but, like maybe you found a lockpick that you could pick a door to get in there. But the whole building is full of people, and you could kill them all if you had a good enough weapon, or you could. There might be a way to like talk your way in, or the dialogue's like, because it's all randomly generated, the dialogue is not specific to the situation exactly. But like if your objective is to get an item from somebody, you can talk to them and ask them for it, and you can either bribe them with money or give them an item or try other things. But my standard tactic is, if I can find a pack of cigarettes, then I go to the ventilation system for the building on the outside and just put the cigarettes in there. And whatever you put in the ventilation system just is released as a gas throughout the whole building. And whatever it is, regardless, even if it's a positive thing, everyone evacuates the building because they're like, what is this fucking gas coming out of our vents? And so they all just leave the building only for like 10 seconds and they go back in, but that's enough that you can just, if you're willing to brave the gas, whatever it is you put in there, you can just walk in and then you have to run the place, and you can, lockpicking just takes some time, and a lockpick, I guess. That's what I was taught in thief school. But what I mean is any character can do it. Like, there is a thief character, but anyone who has a lockpick can pick a lock. The only disadvantage is that if anyone's around, they're going to obviously get annoyed at you. The sort of like crime and guilt system is, it's surprising how well it works, because I know that can be a rabbit hole for games. Like, you get into like, oh, you've done this thing and this guy knows about it and that guy is allied with that guy, and so this happens, and it can get into enough of a mess that you don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, I think even Skyrim gets into this. It's just times in the Elder Scrolls games where you're like, why the hell are they mad at me? Or like, why aren't they mad at me? Or a horse saw me steal something. Now I have a bounty.
A mud crab got really annoyed with me because it watched me pickpocket something.
Hey, enough of that. The crime system is certainly not perfect, but it's kind of, the art style is very kind of, cutesy. Everything is quite simple. That belies some of the more, grim content. So, a lot of it comes out through, like I say, you start as like a basic class who doesn't have any special abilities, but can do most things. But then there's sort of 20 unlockable characters. And so one of them is just like a gangster. There are two gangs, the Crepes and the Blads. And if you play as one of those, they're both character classes. I don't know what the pink one does, but the blue one, you can walk up to any other blue gangster and just say, hey, you're part of my posse now. And you can have like 3 of them with you, and you can order them to do things, or they'll just back you up in a fight. And then, I've unlocked, the vampire, and for the crime system, one of the things it's strangely mild on is drinking blood. Like, every character has a special ability, and the vampire special ability is just if you get behind someone, you can just like drink their blood, and while you're doing that, they're kind of immobilized and it heals you. Interestingly, you can only do it when you are injured, so as soon as you're at full health, you can't do it anymore, and that person will be dazed for a little bit, but you can't finish them off that way. But if anyone else sees you do it, if it's like a gangster and there's another gangster next to it, as soon as you start doing it, they'll attack you. And if it's a cop and a cop sees you doing it, they don't like that. But if it's just like a stranger, if there's someone they're not allied with, they will say, go away, as they watch you drink their blood.
Maybe that's because they don't know what blood is. They've only got blood.
Perhaps. These characters are like, it's surprising how different they are and what an effect they have on gameplay. Because the fact that the vampire can drink blood from anybody, and it heals him, means that, that's kind of their only ability. They don't start with anything interesting. They only start with some cologne, which makes people like you more, but I've never figured out a use for that. In fact, a burglar stole my, cologne, just walked past and just snatched it. And I thought, I'll just let that go.
That crime system does work.
Yeah.
Hey.
So the fact that you can always top up your health and you have the kind of an unlimited supply, really, because you can always find people on their own, means that it doesn't make you tougher in any one fight. Like, any one fight that would have killed you from full health will still kill you because you're not better at combat. But usually you can basically take on, you can probably take on like 3 people if you have like a knife and they don't have anything too crazy. But the drawback is you'll be at half health after that. But if you can always top it up, it means you can just always do the fight. And so my playstyle as a vampire is just like, I'm probably just going to kill everybody and I'll get really beaten up and then I'll just drink enough blood to be okay again and just keep doing that over and over again, which the other classes can't really do.
Right.
The thief is, their special ability is just to pickpocket. So we walk up behind someone and just grab at them and you get one random item that they own. And that is great for just making money. You just walk around the town stealing from everybody and you get a little bit of cash usually. If you steal from another thief, which is forbidden, you often get a lockpick, which is useful. And then they start with a lockpick and, I think a bunch of lockpicks, safe cracker, so you can crack a safe without having the code. Every safe has a code, like there's always someone who has it. And because you're a pickpocket, you can possibly steal it from them if you know who it is. And a window remover, which is the best tool because no one else has that. And every building has, like 10 windows and only one door. And often there'll be a window to the actual like room within the building that you need to get into. And so if you can just
punch it.
No, well, you can and it will break.
Right.
And it will make noise, but you can't climb through. I think the frame is like reinforced or something. It looks like they're all kind of a crossbeam type thing. And you can shoot through windows and people can see you through windows, but you can't get into them unless you have a window remover.
Well, that's all of my ideas.
So Thief is kind of cool because you end up being able to do it without hurting anybody. And then it gets more exotic from there. Like, I mentioned the vampire. The zombie, it can't use guns. When you melee someone, you gain health. Cops will attack you on sight. It's illegal to be a zombie. And when anybody who's just interacted with you in any way dies of any cause, they come back as a zombie. And those zombies will attack everyone else on sight, and they will turn them into zombies. And if you spit on them first, then when they come back as a zombie, they'll be one of your zombies, and you can tell them what to do.
So like, as in that you've licked them, so they're yours.
Yeah, that's how zombie loyalty works. But spitting costs you health, so you got to be careful.
Right.
But then you can beat them up to get more health. So you can like spit on them, it costs you health, and beat them up to get the health, and then they die, and they come back as a zombie because you killed them, and then they become yours because you spat on them. And that's how biology works. But that is amazing because it's like, everything's simulated all the time because it's quite a small chunk of the city. Just everyone is always doing their own thing. Thieves are independently going around stealing things. Any zombies that exist are going around attacking people. And obviously there's an exponential element to that. Like the more zombies there are, the more zombies are created. The more zombies there are, the more zombies are created. And, fights, the combat system is very kind of like button mashy and kind of run around, and it's all very slippery, and you're kind of swinging wildly with whatever weapon you have, or punching or shooting or whatever. And it's very chaotic, and people getting hit in the crossfire all the time, and of course they get aggroed, and then all their faction are aggroed, and it all spirals out of control. When it's zombies, and everyone who dies in that conflict is coming back as a zombie, it goes insane. And there's also loads of knockback on everything. And if you hit someone with a baseball bat, they go flying so hard that they will like crash through a brick wall. And that's one of the only things that can get through a brick wall. Like short of a grenade, like hitting somebody into it is one of the best ways to break into a building. And so like a fight with, 16 people in a alley where there's buildings on either side is just going to ruin both buildings. And as it kind of scales up, it just gets completely insane. And so like a zombie outbreak is just, a kind of apocalypse level event. And you just end up with a city full of bodies and money and, can loot everybody. And that's just like the polar opposite of the thief, where you're doing everything very subtly and not leaving too much damage. And there's the shapeshifter, which is like a tiny mutant baby. And it doesn't actually shift shapes, it possesses people.
Oh.
So you don't like mimic somebody, you actually just go inside them and then you are them for a while. And when you leave, they'll be dazed for a while. And your thing will take a little while to recharge. And that's amazing. Like you can just do, that feels like if you're going to pick one class and make the whole game about that, it would have to be this one, because then you can, if a burglar walks past, you just possess him, and now you've got the pickpocket ability. You can do all the pickpocketing stuff, and then you can go and find a gangster and possess them, and now that gangster can recruit other gangsters because they don't know he's possessed. And, you can be a cop, and I haven't unlocked the cop as a playable character, but I've possessed one as a shapeshifter, and their ability seems to be they can just legally arrest anybody. If it's someone in a faction and another faction member sees you doing it, they'll attack you. Probably not because they think it's illegal, but because they just don't care and are willing to defend their friend. And so Shapeshifter is like a great way to just get a little sample of like what everyone is like to play as. Like even shopkeepers are an unlockable class. You can become a shopkeeper later. I don't know what that's like. I've unlocked investment banker, which I haven't been tempted to play because their traits are, they're addicted to all drugs. There are, in roguelikes there's like potions and they're unidentified and you know what they're going to do. In this game it's syringes and you find them in the trash. And just injecting yourself with a syringe that you found in the trash is a thing that you might want to do in this game. And investment bankers are addicted to all drugs. They just need to take something every X seconds. And they have like a special relationship with drug dealers. They get discounts on all these things. They also start with loads and loads of money and they can borrow from everybody. You can always borrow from a bank. I don't know what the consequences are for not paying it back, but the investment banker can get into debt with drug dealers and shopkeepers and goons to feed their habit. And I don't know what the hell the advantage of that playstyle is, but it sounds kind of insane.
It sounds like it's a really robust simulation. Has it got multiplayer?
It does, yeah.
All right.
I haven't tried it. It also has a daily challenge, which I haven't really dipped in too much. And it has like mutators and there's an unlock system, like a meta progression thing, but I don't really understand it because it says like you pay chicken nuggets to unlock traits, and traits are what you get when you level up and you pick them at the end of the level. You get offered 3, but some of the ones I have the opportunity to unlock, I've already been offered in the game, and so I don't know like what am I getting by unlocking it? Is this just I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, the unlocking characters is kind of like sort of done like achievements. So I unlock the vampire by destroying 20 graves.
Right.
Which every now and then when you destroy a grave, obviously a ghost comes out and will punch you. And so it's difficult to keep destroying graves when so many ghosts are punching you.
Is Ghost a playable class?
Good question. I don't know. I don't see it in the menu, but there's also a bunch of like dark silhouettes down the bottom that I think are like secret classes.
Seems pretty spooky.
And I bet you have to do something weird to unlock those because everything else you're told how to unlock it.
Right.
And it would be interesting because there's like a Ghostbuster gun, that will, fires
Bust
a ray
ghosts.
that, it affects anything supernatural. So it also works on vampires. Oh, vampires, by the way, their mortal enemy is werewolves. Every class has their own like, repeatable quest that they do on every level. So in addition to you assign these missions to steal things and neutralize people. But you also have a class quest. So if you're the thief, it's to raid every single safe and every single chest on the level, regardless of what you're asked to do for your missions. If you're the zombie, it's to turn a certain percentage of the population into zombies. Can't remember what the vampires one is. Oh, no, sorry. The vampires one is the werewolf. You have a werewolf sensor. You can that just pings more and more rapidly the closer you are to a werewolf. And there's only one werewolf on every level. And when you find who it is, you just have to, you attack it. As soon as you attack it, it reveals itself as a werewolf and you have like a massive battle and it's just super tough. I had it recently where I was just really low on health and I was just looking for people to like drink their blood. And as I got closer to this guy, the werewolf sensor was pinking faster and faster, but he didn't notice me before I did it. So I just drank him to death. Like the whole epic battle was just bypassed because I drank all of his blood.
This sounds mad.
Yep.
Did you dream this into existence?
It's got a lot of things I like. And I'd heard about it before and it just sounded, one of the reasons I didn't play it is because the pitch is just like, oh, it's everything. It's a brawler, it's an RPG, it's a roguelike, it's an emergent Deus Ex game. You can do anything. You can inject yourself with a serum that makes you giant and then you crush everything. You can play as a gorilla. And it was too much as a pitch. It's like, well, what is it then? Like, what do you actually do? Or like, what is the shape of the game? What are the limitations on it? And the thing that they didn't say that is now clear to me is, oh, it's just a very small chunk of the city. It's almost like Warren Spector's thing of like, what if you could just simulate one city block? It's by making it not a huge sprawling open world thing, they can have the level of simulation up really, really high. It's not going to be like a performance problem or anything. There's probably there's probably 50 odd people in a given level. So a lot, but not like insane. And so when something like a zombie outbreak happens, that's in anything that's trying to simulate a whole city, that's just a disaster level event. It's just kind of unrecoverable and the whole game will be over and it wouldn't be able to simulate it. But because it's just like a few buildings, like it can just all be taken over by zombies and then you just go to the next level. And that's not true.
Man, so it's still in early access, is that right?
Yeah.
How long has it been in early access?
A long time.
Right.
I feel like at least 2 years.
Yeah, because I remember seeing something of it, like, as you say, years ago. I was just wondering,
What was it called?
Streets of Rage.
Oh.
Play on Streets of Rage. Oh. Not as good a play on Streets of Rage as John's game, Streets of Mage.
That was a jam. You can get away with anything.
Shall we do some questions from questions?
Yes.
Okay. First up, Josh writes, Dear Crates of Loot, it seems like loot box mechanics are coming under legal scrutiny in more countries, at the same time that Gwent, Artifact and Magic the Gathering Arena are all preparing for release. This could end up being very unfortunate timing for those games, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how they will adapt if trading card games are forced to abandon the booster pack model. Thanks, Josh. I also wanted to take this moment to debut a new Crate and Crowbar feature, which is when I read the emails directly from our inbox, and because of Google attempting to be helpful, it just provides the answer underneath in the form of 3 different clickable buttons that would just reply to this and save us all of the trouble that we've been going to for all this time. So in this case, the answer is, I agree with you. Sounds like a good idea. Very interesting.
Is that all 3 of their responses?
Yeah, I thought I'd form the full answer out of whatever Google tells me to say. So that's that. But if we were to answer with our human mouths and brains, what would we say?
It's kind of tough because I can totally see the argument for card packs and loot boxes being exactly the same. They all have a random selection of stuff inside. I think most of them now will guarantee a certain rarity level, which the old card packs used to do. You pay money and you hope you get something good, and the value inside can vary quite a lot. And that certainly sounds like gambling.
You seem to remember loot boxes, do they have to declare the odds now in certain countries?
I think this seems like a lot of that regulation, and I'm not an expert, stems from concerns over gambling in a more broad sense as well. So when items are granted sort of arbitrary value based on their rarity from a loot box system, they can then be bet with and treated as sort of currency, basically, which is sort of one of the root issues. It's one of the big issues with, for example, Counter-Strike system. So that isn't necessarily the case if there's no third-party market for those items, I suspect. But I don't know what I'm talking about.
So Artifacts, you can sell the cards on Steam trading, what's it called? Marketplace.
Yeah.
For money.
That's true.
I think Valve's argument has always been that because you can't cash out on Steam, that therefore these things don't actually have...
But once Steam starts selling food and houses...
which is only a matter of time.
I mean, there's no green light process. You could just put a house on Steam right now.
Yeah, indeed. Uncensored houses. But I would say that even though loot boxes are part of the conversation, it's not like countries have reached a consensus or have enacted decisions that are irrevocable at this point. I know that I think, I can't remember who it was, but one developer was sort of asking its user base to lobby the government of one country to get them to either walk back a decision or part of the process by which something might become a problem legally. The other thing is it depends where you're marketing something, because if the law in a country where your game doesn't do well or where you haven't translated it to outlaws something, that's very different to if your core market that has been ploughing money into this thing forever suddenly changes, right?
Yeah.
So, and there are so many workarounds, so many loopholes. Yeah, like the whole, we publish the odds, therefore argument, or, I think partly it might be that also once we get to a certain level of saturation with this as a monetization mechanic, people have an upper limit to how many games they can play at that point, and therefore maybe you'd need to find other ways of being a point of difference, or suddenly the fact that you maybe have a premium payment tier that gets rid of a lot of that stuff, or maybe subscriptions will come back and you'll get a certain amount of random stuff each month or so. There's, I think, other ways that might be better in terms of people's psychological approach to games. Because I can see, I'm waffling a little bit, but it's because I think there's a lot of different thoughts that I haven't written down anywhere, so I haven't formed them quite. But I also think that if something is viewed as potentially addictive, then it might be that those games will be banned outright by parents for their children, or it might be that people self-ban from those things, whereas if they went with a less aggressive or a less exploitative model, their user bases, they would have more of those background players or the sort of fair weather people. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
I think there's a slight assumption that like sticker packs and card packs aren't bad just because they happened before and they were exploiting kids then. I spent a lot
I was
of money.
exploited by these when I was a child. Yeah.
I spent a lot of money on Street Fighter card packs trying to get that shiny Chun-Li. It never happened.
Yeah, I mean, FIFA is a kind of booster pack model thing, right?
Yeah, right. Ultimate Team, yeah.
Ultimate Team.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I remember when I was a kid and they had Tazos at the same time as Pogs, and I think that was Walker's thing where you would get a themed, like, Looney Tunes kind of character in your crisps on a little plastic disc that were collectible.
Who okayed selling a plastic disc in a crisp packet? Like, of all the...
It's like the threepenny bit in the Christmas pudding.
Yeah.
It's just asking for trouble.
But this brings me back to my favourite grievance, which is the salt and shake crisps, where if people weren't around in the early 90s, late 80s, I guess, in the UK, eating crisps, these were unsalted potato chips that would come with a sachet of salt so that you could presumably regulate the amount of salt that you had on the thing. And I think
I thought it was just for like the pleasure of the process.
So I think
feel like you're involved in the crisp making.
To older potato crisps where there would be an actual twist of salt in the thing, and that would be, you know, the general way of actually seasoning this thing. Anyway.
Because like the salt would fall off if they didn't do that, maybe?
Anyway, so Walker's at around the same time that I was eating these things had this giveaway where they would actually put a $5 in random packets of crisps.
I remember this.
But these would be also in dark blue sachets of around the same size. So occasionally my mum would get me salt and shake crisps, and they went from being a pleasure because the act of opening the salt shaker and rattling the bag around was really fun, to being a kind of, I've won it. Oh, no, I haven't. It's just a bag of salt. And I suppose you could make some sort of, you know, Roman thing about, oh yeah, but salt was really valuable. It's like, yeah, but we're not Romans now, are we? So
that's why your yelly pear is called a saltery. I liked those salt and shake crisps. I think not so much for... I didn't really adjust the amount of salt because I always want the maximum amount of salt in any given situation.
What kind of person only puts a pinch of it in?
They were flavoured ones eventually, as well as the ready salted. And so like the crisps would have kind of the flavour already imbued in them, and then the salt... I think the salt was different too. But I like them for the sort of like, I got to decompose the crisp making process and like taste what a flavoured crisp tastes like without salt, and then with it.
That's interesting. I wonder whether you could make your own just by getting really plain crisps and then taking out the flavour sachet from a pot noodle. And shaking that in, maybe. Broadly the same. What?
You just eat an Oxo cube and then look at a Pringle.
Exactly, Oxo cubes are quite salty. No, not a Pringle. They've already been done.
I think there's a weird convention of people getting packets of ramen, eating them dry and sprinkling the seasoning on top. Which is kind of there already.
So
because it's kind of a crunchy snack. It's partially cooked already. So.
But you don't have to.
Maybe
the Brooklyn Nine-Nine tip about... it's not called pot noodles, but their equivalent of pot noodles is you break off a bit of the dry noodle first, then you boil it, and then at the end you kind of crush up and sprinkle the dry noodle on top, and it's like a crunchy topping.
Oh.
And that like saves Jake in prison. No spoilers, but...
That's so weird.
That is weird.
want to try it.
It's so specific that I'm sure the writers have tried this.
Yeah,
and, like, it's one of their personal favourites.
Yeah.
Someone was actually doing that in the writer's room.
Yeah.
And everyone else was like, what is this? And he's like,
No,
I'll write it in and I'll show you.
The correct thing to do if you are looking for like a mildly self-destructive act that society will approve of, is to simply just like keep grating cheese into your ramen until it's more cheese than water, and then you've just created cheesy noodles. God. That's how there's a lot of different ways of shaming yourselves with a packet of ramen, and that's my chosen one.
I've been low enough in my life that I've just fried grated cheese. Just grated it straight into the frying pan.
Wow.
That's a good keto tip. Crunchy tortilla shells with just cheddar.
Because if you ever, like, I make omelette sometimes, and there's a little bit of cheese, like, that gets left over in the pan, and then the pan just, it just cools naturally, and like, an hour later or something, I'm about to wash it up, I'm like, oh, that's cheese. And I eat it, and it's incredible! The flavour is phenomenal. It's had time to, like, I don't know, all the, fat has gone out of it, and now it's just pure flavour. Why not just fry the cheese directly? That's what I'm saying.
Alton Brown, I think, secret grilled cheese sandwich is he sandwiches cheese between the bread slices, but also then puts it on the outside and fries both sides.
Nice.
This, yeah.
So you get that melty cheese and that crisp good cheese.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a nightmare.
I think you get that for free in, like, toasted sandwich makers because it just leaks out through, like, gaps and then, like, burns on the
there's
metal.
every possibility of cheese in a toasted sandwich maker. So.
My self-destructive act of choice recently, when I'm faced with just a need to do something regrettable, has been to eat crisps and watch exactly 40 minutes of Justice League. And I've done this twice in the last 2
The
weeks.
movie?
Yeah. And I'm almost at the end.
Have you made it all the way through?
Not yet.
Nor have I. I've tried several times.
40 minutes is my limit for how much of that film I can take in one setting. It's fascinating because I will watch anything and it's still almost unwatchable.
It's really aggressively dull.
It's so boring. It's really, really bad. I was just impressed by how bad it is. It's like watching someone else's D&D campaign, but nobody likes each other.
And I was okay with Batman vs Superman, weirdly. Like, I know a lot of people hate it. I thought it was like 50% of a good film. Like, the sort of Superman as a villain was kind of interesting to me, and it didn't quite make good on that. But I watched it all in one sitting, I think. It didn't take me multiple attempts.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know how they beefed it that hard, but they did. Anyway, so that's about loot boxes. And that's...
I also really like the guy playing the Flash in Justice League.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a real, like, I feel like the combination of, like, Zack Snyder movie and Joss Whedon movie just doesn't really work at all. It's like, talking about flavors that it mix, like, they just don't mix. Like, you can't take elements of one and combine them with the other. You just get the worst of both. Like, Zack Snyder hyper grim action sequences are not improved by the guy who plays the Flash doing a big whoopsie face during every single one of them. It just makes it worse. And, like, Whedon banter doesn't work because the next scene is, like, someone screaming in a big red CGI axe breaking a wall into your face.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were we doing? Podcast, yeah. Hang on. Next question comes from Duncan, who writes, Dear Questions, happy 11 millionth episode. Sat on my podcast app for well over a year now. I have Prey, a lock-in at the Crate and Crowbar. That's a coincidental moment, John, because you were there then. You're here now.
I contributed to that.
You did. You were there. We were all there.
So was I.
No, you weren't.
Well, there you go. You can't just say we were all there.
Well, I mean, all the people who were there are here now.
It's my birthday.
Duncan continues, I can't listen to this because I haven't finished Prey yet, and I will get round to playing it. My list of games I've already bought but need to get round to playing has gone from embarrassingly long to impressively long. So it's with pride that I can declare that the oldest game that I will totally get round to playing is Deus Ex Human Revolution. What is the oldest game you need to get round to playing? Thanks, from Duncan. And Google provides the reply to this, which is cool. I'll check it out. Glad you enjoyed it. Awesome. Thanks.
It's very positive.
Speaking of Prey, who is Arcane, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I am determined to play Arx Fatalis at some point, which was their first game, I think. And a big old...
Did they do 2 of those?
Fantasy immersive sim.
Dark Messiah and Might and Magic was Arx Fatalis 2.
Yes.
It was purchased by Ubisoft.
I love that game. And so I'm determined to get around to the first thing that they made, which I believe is a lot more open world-ish kind of simulation based.
It's a dungeon. It's like one big dungeon. It's like, but it's much more simmy. Yeah, much more simmy.
I also heard it's quite hard to control.
Does it have like gesture spells?
I think it's got something like that,
Yeah, every game with gesture recognition the developers are always like, don't do gesture recognition. It's something you got to try it for yourself to convince yourself that you shouldn't do gesture recognition, but everyone who does comes away thinking, let's never do that again. I did play that for like a short period of time and I stopped. I can't remember if I actually had some issue with it or if I just kind of lost track of it and forgot to go back to it.
What's your answer to this, Tom?
Another World. Because I'm a huge Flashback fan. But that was my first, I hadn't played Another World, and I still haven't. And it's been reissued multiple times, so there's probably like a modern-friendly version I can play. There is, I'm afraid I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but I retweeted recently a GIF of someone who's making a Flashback-inspired game, but I would say it goes even beyond inspired. Like, the levels they're showing are the opening scenes of Flashback, with a few changes. Like, okay, it's not a remake of Flashback, but it's, it's incredibly similar. Certain animations just seem almost frame by frame the same. But God, there's something about that game that's just kind of, has never been, kind of surpassed in some ways. Like the atmosphere of it was just so, specific and unique. It's lodged in my brain. And actually, like, even the missions selection board and heat signature is kind of directly inspired by Flashback, because I just remember that when you start in a jungle in a Flashback and eventually you get to a city and it's a big change of scene. It just, because the atmosphere is so good in that game, it's amazing to kind of go to a completely different place. And you get there, like, your first kind of quest is to get a work permit. And once you get a work permit, you can just use these job terminals, just take any job. There's just people who want things done. You just work for them. And I remember that just being amazingly exciting to me at the time. Like, now that's quite a common pattern in games, but for me at the time, it was like, wow, I can just take any of these jobs. I can just do work and get money for it. Yeah, it was really cool. And so presumably Another World is great. I don't know.
Pip.
I thought I didn't have an answer for this, and then I remembered that I have spent a bunch of time this week and last week organising the PC Gamer magazine archive, and have in passing dipped into the issues and seen a non-zero number of columnists photographed wearing bum bags. However, in the early days of PCG magazine, one of the games that they were looking forward to was Bullfrog's Creation, which mentioned the word undersea and had a picture of a dolphin involved, and so that has now become a game that I would like to play, and it's not on GOG, so I don't know whether that I have done almost zero research in terms of actually getting hold of it. It pretty much exclusively involved going to GOG and then typing it into their search bar and nothing popping up and going, oh, well, I suppose this is lost forever. Let's move on.
Remember that at all? What is it?
I only know there was a picture of being under the sea, because I was so aware at that point that I should probably be almost done. It was because the archive, because of moving office, the archive was a bit of a mess because everything was still in boxes dotted around. And so my former librarian self came back to haunt me and was like, you can't leave this room until everything has been accounted for. It took a lot of effort not to make an impromptu card catalogue and start cross-referencing things. So yeah, I had reasons to not be down there for huge lengths of time beyond the ones that I had already committed. But it looked like just an underwater kind of 3D exploration-y thing. One of you two seemed to express some form of recognition.
The name sounded familiar, but I don't remember seeing a shot of it.
Maybe it never got released or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it was one of those ones that people talked a good game about. It was featured on the cover a couple of times and then just nothing.
That sounds likely to me just because I remember a game called Evolver, which is also about, I assume that the Bullfrog one is about creation and evolution and stuff. I was super hyped about that game and it never came out. And am I remembering correctly that High Octane was a Bullfrog game? Do you remember that?
I don't
It was a Wipeout style racer, and I think it was, but it's so outside of their if they have one, that
some information for us.
My memory denies it.
Creation was a cancelled real-time strategy game developed by Bullfrog Productions as a spin-off of the Syndicate series.
What?
What?
Set on an alien water world, a player-controlled submarine is tasked with looking after marine life and defending it from... No, hang on. Yeah, so this is a left turn. So, I'm going to read the sentence again. Creation was a cancelled real-time strategy video game developed by Bullfrog as a spin-off of their Syndicate series of real-time tactics games. Set on an alien water world, a player-controlled submarine is tasked with looking after marine life and defending it from the Syndicate, who run planet Earth. Creation was the working title of multiple Bullfrog games, including Magic Carpet, Powermonger, and Populous. An aquatic-based incarnation of Creation became Magic Carpet. And the final incarnation was led by Guy Simmons. So there's a bunch to unpack there, partly the fact that it's apparently because this was 1995, due for 97, so
does it exist?
No, Magic Carpet does.
But yeah, so is this the version of Creation that became Magic Carpet, or is Magic Carpet something else?
I just love the fact that, like, oh god, we'll make a sequel to the game. What is the new premise? Well, the people you are in the last game, yeah, they're in space now and they're menacing fish.
So you play as the fish.
Maybe they're not menacing fish on purpose. Maybe they're doing something else, but it happens to be impacting
All
the
Syndicate
fish.
people do is walk around in a trench coat, fire a minigun, and a bunch of different directions.
Persuading the fish.
But yeah, so does the water thing exist? Is that what Magic Carpet is?
No.
Right.
Magic Carpet's in the air. It's the other element.
Well, that's what it sounded like it. But then I wasn't sure if we were talking about the water anymore. And because you said that some version of Creation became, so I wasn't sure.
I suspect it would be the flying around in 3D thing.
I mean,
this is reminded me of something. And I'm going to abuse my platform. Dear listener, if you played a game, I think it was kind of early Windows 95, where you were a miniature submarine trundling around the ocean, doing it. I think it was kind of an elite type game. You went out and did missions and salvaged stuff, but you were a tiny person and you occasionally had to run away from very large fish. If you remember that at all, especially the name, could you tweet me? Because it's been driving me insane and I'm not sure if I dreamed it or not.
It seems like this was going to go out of Magic Carpet, not the other way around, because I didn't think the dates lined up. So this is going to be a use of Magic Carpet technology rather than the other way around. Although there's some amazing 90s game speak in this, so I'm going to read some more of this actually. It's good when I read things from Wikipedia. What a good new segment. By late 1996, Creation was near completion. Bullfrog believed the game was shaping up to be an epic. According to Bullfrog, those who had seen the engines of Magic Carpet and Magic Carpet 2 noticed their resemblance to film taken underwater. And as the idea of a game with
why would a Magic
existences,
Carpet have engines? It's magic.
Ecosystems had already been discussed. It was fate that the elements be merged. And then the cancellation in 1997, it was decided that sub-games don't sell. And Creation was cancelled. Molyneux commented, "I think it's a real shame that it was killed because it could have been something very impressive." He stated that he believed the cancellation was because many people thought that Bullfrog should focus on games that they knew would be successful and wanted them to concentrate on Populous 3 instead of the unknown quantity of Creation. But Lionhead also attempted a project called Creation later on, apparently in an episode of Games Master, Dave Perry claimed that there was a version of Magic Carpet that becomes Creation when the player flies underwater. But there was no evidence for this.
That's just one of those
like many
playground
legends.
Yeah. If you put in this number of commands, you can see so-and-so without their clothes on.
I don't want to accuse Dave Perry of being a child in a 90s playground, but this is something I associate, obviously, because I was a child in a 90s playground, and I know the thing you do is lie about what's in games at length. Do kids still do that, do you think?
I remember very distinctly, having arguments about what happens in a game, or when you do this, you can do this, and it's only, no, you can't. And then we would always resolve this by just saying, well, on mine, you can. And that was just acceptable. The game's different for everyone.
I must have told this story on the podcast before, but the time when I was young and I had never played Command & Conquer, and I just flat out lied about having not played Command & Conquer to the point I was like, I drove this Jeep through a wall of a nuclear bunker and it exploded. It was great. It's not possible. And anyway.
I think So what we've established is I no longer have an answer for this game anyway. We've gone back round. But off the back of John soliciting...
Do you know what this is?
I don't know what that is, but I want to add in my own game.
Is it that?
No, so what I remember is I think it was a free game that came bundled with an antivirus software. And I spent hours on it, and it was this grid of squares, and the lines between the squares would be the pathways that you as the antivirus could travel along, and I think you were trying to avoid other little blocky shapes that would travel along them and, you know, would symbolize the viruses or something. It was something like that. It was so, you know, lo-fi. It was so basic, but it was really, really, I think one of the first times I got properly too into a video game and would just play again and again and again, trying to, yeah.
Rad.
So if anyone knows which antivirus program that was and can provide me with a copy of that, that would be great.
Our next question comes from Daniel, who writes, Dear Fate and YouTube star, possibly one for Tom S as a gaming dad. I think he means Alex, because Tom Senior doesn't have children.
Neither of them are here.
We'll never know. My kids are 9 and 7 and really like games and watching people play games. Are conventions like EGX or Rest okay for young'uns? If not, what lower age limit would you recommend? They're not planning on going to the after show drinks if that was a concern. Cheers. Google, once again stepping up to the breach to answer this question, states, sounds good to me. I think that's a great idea. I'm fine with whatever.
I'm fine with whatever with your kids. It doesn't actually bother me.
So actually, as it happens, I was looking at the EGX site today because my listing went up. And I think today they advertised the fact that they have a family area, or an area where it's, you know, specified for families, and kids under 10 get in free. So that's a reason to give it a go, I suppose. Like, I think it's always like a super noisy environment, and so it depends on the kids to some extent how happy they are with that. But they also have like a dedicated chill out zone now where people can stay for as long as they like. So there's probably good reasons to say yes to this, as Google does.
Yeah, definitely. Like, some kids love that kind of environment. Just like, there's just shitloads of like exciting, cool things and lots of noise and colors and lights and stuff. And I remember I went to Minecon one year and showed Gunpoint there, and Minecon's audience is incredibly young, and kids seem to really get on with Gunpoint. And my favorite moment was watching a dad with a kid who must have been like 13 maybe, and there was 2 stations for Gunpoint, and they're sitting down playing side by side. And the kid just kept leaning over and telling his dad how to do it. His dad was like 3 levels behind him, and he's like, no, you got to connect that to that. And yeah, kids pick things up real fast.
Yeah. But no, I think they've made there's also like the board games area that Asmodee runs. So there's stuff to do that isn't sort of noisy show floor stuff. So
as long as they can handle a bit of queuing without going insane.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the kids and their tolerance for all different elements, because I think Res is a lot brighter and airier because the venue that it takes place in is actually a lot of old shop fronts with a lot of space in between. And so if you're with a kid who gets overwhelmed by crowds because, you know, being a bit lower down, or, you know, in the middle of a busy thing and maybe not being seen all the time, it's easier to take a bit of a break from, whereas the EGX venue at the NEC tends to be this cavernous hall where, you know, you can get lost, or it's quite dark and quite loud, and, you know, it's a bit much. And I say that not because I don't trust children's ability to override all of that stuff. It's that I find it a bit much, and often will just go and get a coffee from somewhere nearby, or step outside just to be away from it all for a little bit.
I suppose the benefit of the NEC with EGX is that you are near some greenery. There's the little outside areas and things, and you can get away and still do something. Whereas it's a little more difficult.
So I would also say that I think the actual adult games are obviously off in the over 18 section, but I'm not sure what the cutoff is for that. So I think you maybe would need to have a little look at what else is on the show floor to get a sense of, you know, how much, I guess, family-friendly material you would encounter versus stuff that maybe is 15 plus, I think.
I think the cutoff is literally like 18 rated games. Like anything that's like a 12 plus or a 15 plus will be on the show floor.
But I don't know whether there's any, you know, sort of guidance on, you know, things being siloed off a little bit to, so I, you know, because if you're saying that something is suitable or that under 10s can get in free of charge, but other games are, you know, would have a higher rating or a higher advisory thing as you go in, that's kind of an interesting challenge. And I think it basically becomes 12A territory where it's up to the parent to, or not up to, but the organisers have sort of handed that responsibility back to a certain extent. And I think it's reasonable, but it can be a bit difficult given the sheer number of games on show. So it might be that going to a smaller event or a local thing or, you know, something where you've maybe been before on your own as the adult and have vetted it a bit.
Yeah, I think, although I do think that like with the like, if I were to say to any of them that you'll probably find something, like I don't think going for all day is necessarily a good idea, but even for an afternoon, I think you'd probably find enough stuff that was age appropriate at something like EGX, whereas at smaller events it actually gets a little harder because it's naturally more unless it's a specialised event.
Well, that's the thing. I'm just thinking, like, it might just be worth keeping an eye on particular game events, calendars, or whatever else to see what's in your area. But and I'm only raising these things because I think if I was taking, you know, a niece or nephew along to them, that would be what I would be a bit concerned about. I would, you know, try and take into account their particular sensitivities or whatever, and also what I wanted them to maybe see. So I think, what age were the kids? Did they say?
6 and 9, I think, or 7 and 9.
Yeah, like I've seen plenty of like around 10-year-old kids, but I think younger kids I haven't seen so many of.
I've seen people walking around with babies.
But what I'm saying is, like, I've seen little clusters of kids, you know, round a console telling each other what to do, or, you know, clearly they're on a you know, someone's birthday outing or something, and it's really quite sweet, but I haven't seen that many younger than that.
I wonder what would happen if you got a baby to play Sound Self. Because they do make a lot of vocal noise anyway. It's just not quite as constant.
Might be worth asking on the Discord to see if anybody takes their kids along to events.
Yeah, possibly.
Whether there's any things to watch out for or things that have been really helpful in figuring out whether it's a good event for them.
Totally.
So yeah, the Discord link for Crate and Crowbar's Discord is on the crateandcrowbar.com page.
It is, yes. Our final question comes from James, who writes, Dear Crichton Punfail Bar, I've recently been playing The Witcher 3 after it received various PC Game of the Year awards, and after the recommendations of CNC Pod, I've noticed that similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, it has leveling weapons. And James goes on to explain that by leveling weapons he means the phenomena whereby sort of item, or in RPGs, item, weapon, gear archetypes repeat at higher levels of effectiveness. So, you know, Iron Sword reoccurs at level 50 in its level 50 mode, meaning that legendary weapons and armor that you find at level 1 gets replaced by a higher level thing of a lower tier of fanciness, basically. My question is, what is the CNC take on leveling weapons items in CRPGs? Are you similarly annoyed, or is it just me? Have you seen really good examples where weapon leveling made sense, or cases when weapon leveling fucked a game up completely? So he's been specifically, he finds this feature very annoying and references Baldur's Gate as an example of a game where a magic item is kind of simply just a magic item, and it's, you know, has an identity when you find it, and it kind of retains that because it's not replaced.
That's basically the good version.
Yes, the good version of this, where you don't have a leveling.
Whereas the bad version is in games, mostly MMOs, and I think Diablo has it a bit. where the design necessitates.
Yep.
I got there. Thank you for the rum, Tom. A high churn, a high turnover of items, and the art budget simply isn't there. Or perhaps there simply isn't enough ways to draw a longsword. That you can find 30 of them in your progression.
Just a fucking piece of metal with a handle. I can't do it any other ways.
But yeah, it does slightly annoy me. When you have your super amazing sword made from dragon bone imbued with gems and stuff, and you go to the next area and the basic iron sword there is of a higher level and therefore does more damage.
Yeah, Diablo 1 and 2 did this. And I think those games also have a different structure where you complete the game on normal and then you start again on nightmare, and it's a new game plus kind of thing. And so, the way, I think I'm remembering Diablo 2. I don't think I got this far in Diablo 1. I might even be wrong about Diablo 1. Maybe Diablo 1 didn't do this. But I'm pretty sure in Diablo 2, it was around the time that you started your new Nightmare campaign. I think there was still like sort of the highest tier of items from your first run through, but then you would start to find something that looked an awful lot like the basic short sword, but its stats would be in excess of anything you've ever found before. And they did give it new names. I can't remember what the basic short sword was called, but I remember like the sort of shitty looking leather skull cap would be like a shark skin skull cap, and it had an armor rating of 3,000 or something stupid. And in that case, I think maybe it was more forgivable because you were replaying the game. Like, you were starting again from the start. Most New Game Plus things don't even bother with that. It's just like, oh, everything's harder now. We increased its stats. It's the same thing. And this was like sort of claiming it was a new thing, but the art was the same. And I think my reaction in that context anyway is like, well, they could either do this or they could just not let you start again on harder mode. They could just not do the New Game Plus thing, which would just be less stuff. Like, it doesn't feel like they could have made all this unique content, forever, and they chose not to.
I find that I really don't mind about this, to be honest, but I think I just sort of accept it as a necessity in different kinds of games. Like, I think loot that kind of remains meaningful for a long period of time is underexplored. Like, I think The Witcher is mentioned in this email, and it's not always like the Diablo model or the MMO model, which I think is just effective game design when it comes to making you want to keep finding things, which is the game is incentivized to do. And because it's fun, it's fine. But like, sometimes I think developers don't consider enough the relationship between the gear the player collects and the plot and how it factors into part of the story. Often the stories you tell yourself are as much to do with the things you found and the gear you were using. So, that is, I think maybe more critical decisions should be made about what system or what approach is appropriate for the kind of story being told, but the reverse doesn't bother me necessarily when it shows up in a story-based game like Divinity or whatever. The thing that I think maybe the missing third way here is like, I'm going to say it, the Dark Souls system or the Monster Hunter system, which is where your gear levels sort of evolves like a Pokemon. So you sort of start off with a certain level of equipment and you level it up. In Dark Souls, you end up with, you take your weapon on a journey through its kind of various iterations and then go up the gear tree. In Monster Hunter, you literally follow a tree of evolutions for that weapon as you take it from its basic form into its kind of later, madder forms with more bits of dragon bolted to it. And that, that means that your level 1 iron sword is still in there somewhere and you have replaced it a bunch of times, but you know what, that's another story that you understand all of the parts of. It's not simply a kind of, and then I threw it in the bin kind of thing.
Destiny did that a bit with you could infuse a favourite weapon with a higher tier other thing to bring it up a bit.
Yeah.
To bring the level of it up a bit.
That works. That's still in Destiny 2, although it's been revised in the expansion and kind of works in an interesting way now as well. But, I think, but it does, yeah. But
that was sort of a side point. I think for me, I do find it jarring. So generally I tune it out and cease to see it, I guess, or it ceases to eat away at my brain in that way. But, in listening to the question, I was wondering whether maybe it's a thing that could be instantly solved with changing the wording or the terminology, because it's about the fact that you have found an epic weapon to you at that moment in time, given your skill set. It's not the game assigning it the trait of being epic is the problem. It's because the game has set that as a thing that exists outside of you, the player, and you pick this up and it's, oh, okay, this is an epic item. And then later on in the game, you pick up an ordinary version of that thing, but because you've progressed, it's, you know, it's better, but is a mundanity, you know? So it's, so I think that maybe if the way that it was phrased was presented more in relation to what your character is able to handle at that point, or what they value in that moment in time, I think that would actually be a way of getting around that, because it would appear epic to you in that moment, given the weapons that you'd had in the lead up to that. And the other thing would seem dull, but also more powerful once you had gained levels and presumably a lot more experience using things.
Yeah.
I think on some level it highlights how much of a dumb abstraction levels are.
Yeah, I was going to say how much dumb abstraction items are.
Yeah. And then that leads you to kind of teeter on the precipice of looking down game design, and nobody wants that.
What is even the point?
So that's probably why he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a much bigger discussion, and not for now, about how the sort of the tropes of, like, you know, item progression in an RPG stems from a sort of traditional kind of fantasy story idea that the hero gets, stems back to mythology, that the hero gets a magic suit of armor or a special sword that does something. And those things have gone from being super specific, which is maybe the thing the Baldur's Gate games do well. They're super specific, you know, Sting, the sword glows when there are orcs nearby, or, you know, whatever it is. Like, Lord of the Rings is full of this, but, like, it's not to this sort of deeply kind of stats driven or kind of mechanics driven kind of idea of what epic even really means. Like, Diablo manages both, because it has those sort of ultra rare weapons that add some crazy new rule to your existing abilities or something, so they feel like this whole thing, this unlocks something that wouldn't be possible otherwise. But too often epic just means like 15 strength. Incredible. And that's not really like resonant of the original purpose of that stuff from a storytelling point of view, which was to give a sense of magic.
Or even if it's rarer, it means you have to spend more time with the game to be sure of getting one.
Yeah.
Or to be in with a chance of getting one. So that was my experience of the last word in Destiny 1 for the longest time. And you were sat there with pockets full of them.
I could start getting last words.
Very upsetting. But yeah, so, but although that was making, when you're talking about the leveling thing, that was making me think of something that popped into my head when you were talking way back when about Frozen Synapse 2, which is, you know, I'm assuming that they used the contract system almost as a difficulty curve. So you start off with all of this money coming in, and then it gradually tails off, but in a way that doesn't pander to the way that games usually try and make you feel like your progression is netting you more and more rewards rather than cutting stuff off. But they both, or rather, that's a way of making you complicit in the game getting harder over time. Whereas in most other games, they give you more resources and let you level up and let you access all of this other stuff, but then they scale the challenge that they are offering outside of you, the character.
Yeah. We talked about reverse progression last week as a thing. I think it's probably a manifestation of that in a different way. But I think you have to present it to the player very carefully when that's what you're doing, because otherwise they can simply feel like you're making a mistake. You know, that you shouldn't be losing, for example.
Yeah, or you're being punished.
Yeah. Exactly. Cool.
It's a bummer.
Well, we always like to end on a sort of like, oh, kind of note. That's the, yeah. That is all of the questions we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode of the Crate and Crowbar, you can email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at Crate and Crowbar, hang out with the Discord community on our Discord, where the link will be on the website at crateandcrowbar.com. You can find us on YouTube youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar, and as ever on Patreon, patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Thank you very much.
I hope we didn't talk you out of it with explaining that the podcast is free.
Yeah.
You're engaging in reverse piracy.
Thank you for choosing to engage in reverse piracy on our behalf.
Definitely.
Rah.
Rah.
Hoya.
Hoya.
Yoha.
Yoha.
Ahoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I knew you were going with that, but I liked Hoya.
No, it's difficult.
Yeah. Hoya, everybody. Back
I
our
was even on
Patreon.
the rum. The myrrh.
Yeah, exactly. Frankincense.
Myrrh.
Indeed. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, you can do so, if you like. I'm on Twitter at CThurston. That's CTHURSTEN. John?
I'm on Twitter, JOHN_ARR. I'm on Frozen Synapse at JOHNARR. No underscore. Come fight me.
I completely forgot to look up my Animal Crossing friend code because I should have given that out because that's where I am most of the time now.
Tom?
I am Pentadact on Twitter, PENT80ACD. Can't fight me on Frozen Synapse because I can't run it.
Lovely. And as ever, I'll be at EGX. Fight me there.
Oh, shit.
Please don't.
Well, you've told them where you're going to be as well.
I know. Oh,
like
God.
which stages, when, and
Just a horde of
you
people
didn't
rushing the
think this
stage.
through. I could be anywhere. No one will know.
That's my secret weapon.
I'll know
you're
where
an
to come and fight you.
Oh.
They know
Well-
you're in Animal Crossing though. They're going to come and hunt you down there.
That's true. But I can play Animal Crossing and do my life tasks at the same time. Because they're basically the same.
Please don't fight me at EGX. Thanks for listening, everybody. No one joined me in the thanks for listening.
It was too
everybody.
sudden.
Well,
We weren't
it's because you were busy, trying to walk back the threat/promise you made, and then you just launched into a thing.
I was just hoping that people would respond. Let's try it again. Thanks for
Thanks for
listening,
listening,
everybody.